Hey, everybody. First take for sure. Welcome back to the Clip and Clarity podcast, brought to you by Taproot Pictures, where we demystify the filmmaking process. Today is a special one. It's just Cole and I. Broing out, exactly. So if you haven't seen any of our episodes, I'm Nate, host of the podcast, and this is Cole. Cole has been on one or two episodes before, but he's a production guru here at Taproot Pictures, and today we're going to just kind of talk about post-production and try to pull the curtain back a little bit on that process.
I think I've been in almost all of the podcast episodes in the background.
Just working away.
That's my desk over there. So sometimes you can see my screen. I was animating logos and different things in the background of the podcast.
Speaking of post-production, Cole was doing it while we were drinking coffee and talking with our other guests.
So that's something I do constantly.
That's pretty meta.
Yeah, it is meta. Big brain.
So kind of in line with the other topics that we've discussed throughout our podcast series, we've kind of talked a little bit about pre-production, the importance of a good plan heading into the filmmaking process. We've talked about production via caring for the craft and how important it is to make sure that everything's going smooth while you're shooting. So we felt it was only right to kind of continue that through our conversation surrounding post-production. So I guess Cole, would you want to explain what post-production entails?
Yeah, post-production is after you have collected all of your footage and all of your core assets to what the video is, what the piece is that you're going to be making. It's assembling all of that. And I was actually thinking about this the other day where you can fill up a hard drive, you can fill up an SD card, but until you assemble it into a single piece or multiple other pieces that then can be shared or put out, it's not anything yet. You can get all the way to being done shooting, and then if you don't put it together, it's still, you just have files on a card. So it's assembling all of that, the visuals, the audio, video effects, color, all of that is coming together to create one single thing or multiple different video assets on the other side of that to then do some kind of an objective. If it's a feature, you're entertaining, you're making people think. If it's commercial, if it's branding, it's driving marketing, it's driving traffic. There's so many different objectives that can be made, but until that gets assembled, those objectives can't come to fruition.
Almost at its core, post-production is just the process of taking what we've shot and converting it to a format that people can even see it as, right? Because when we shoot, a lot of times you can't even read that file format.
Right.
So there's so many things that it entails, but in short, yeah, that is a really good answer. We'll dive into the details and kind of talk about some of those processes a little bit later.
It's interesting. And you and I have talked about this before, but film and video is, well, I guess now video is a medium in which you can't physically embody. You can't physically hold even the final product of a video versus photography. You can print out your photos and hold them, and it's a completely different experience than seeing them on a screen. So it's just interesting that we get done at the end of the day, and you can spend all day in a really, really heavy edit, and it's not like carpentry. It's not like painting where you feel physically tired. You're all just mentally tired because of what you're doing. And then it's not like you're bringing tools in and out and all this stuff. It's such a digital thing. It's really interesting to kind of think about.
That is interesting. And even just thinking about how that's changed over the years and how it will continue to change as, again, at its core, it's basically just making sure people can consume it at whatever format. Sometimes, if you're watching it on a big screen, there's different formats, different qualities versus if you're watching on social and different compressions and all sorts of things in terms of how we distill it down to make sure that it plays efficiently.
Well,
that still looks good. The balance between having a massive file and also looking good. It is definitely an interesting rabbit hole to dive into in terms of file formats and wraps and stuff like that.
Makes you think.
So yeah, there's a lot of complex things there. I think another thing I want to stress about post-production in general, as we kind of set the stage, is the importance of it. You can kind of imply how important it is just based off of how we're talking about it right now and all the things that we say that it entails. But I was talking to Carl before this, and the metaphor came to mind of like third base to home. So, pre-production is like you hit the ball and you run into first. Wait, hold on.
Mm-hmm.
Is there an extra base run in there?
Second.
Regardless, imagine we're on first.
Uh-huh.
Okay. We've booked the job. We're on first. Pre-production is running from first to second. Production is running from second to third. And then post-production, like you don't score a run unless you finish the project well, right? You still have to get across the finish line. Yeah. And deliver. So I think a lot actually rests on post-production and oftentimes on a smaller, more nimble team than what a big production might take, right? Like you might have 50, 60 people on set, and then you might have like an editor and then like a couple other support people surrounding the post-production that's kind of carrying the torch to the finish line. So I would say editors are often undervalued in that sense, right?
Behind the scenes, yeah.
Yeah. It's easy to recognize the importance of the cinematographer on set, and they are very important. But you see them calling shots and they're leading a team and all these things. And then they hand the image to the editor, and then the editor actually makes what it is supposed to be what it is.
Yeah.
They take it and they assemble it in the way that it was designed to be assembled.
Something that I have grabbed from Carl is the idea of there's the story you write, the story you shoot, and the story you edit. And they're all different. And maybe this bleeds into what we were going to talk about with boarding out and planning before we even go into a shoot or shooting for the edit. But each one of those stories, what you write, what you shoot, and what you edit can be different. And you can shoot amazing stuff and really break it in the edit, or you can be flying by the seat of your pants on set and find it in the edit and make something really, really good. So there is a lot of emphasis in like the metaphor, like you can't score until you get to home base.
There's a lot of power that resides in the editor's fingers.
Yes, absolutely.
And it's not just a magic button either.
Right.
Yeah. So I think it's really interesting, and maybe I would ask you a question about this. Could you explain maybe the process of what it feels? In case you didn't know, Cole is one of our main editors at Taproot. So a lot of the stuff that we send out, Cole is very involved in and has his hands all over it behind the scenes, right? Like he was saying, a lot of these times he's editing this podcast. Cole's editing it, and a lot of our other projects. So this one's specifically an area that Cole's an expert in. Can you just explain the process in a little bit more detail, maybe breaking it down? Like, what does it look like to be handed cards and say, like, this is what we need? Where do you start? Like, what does the process look like for you?
So usually the process starts for me is starting with really organized footage. That's a really big thing. Knowing where things are at helps you move a lot more quickly than if things were all over the place and in different folders. And I even edit a little bit different than maybe Carl or some other traditional editors would, is that you can definitely break down your footage. If it's organized by cards, you can then break that down into organizing it by scenes and organizing it by days, or, each little section and piece of the actual story. I don't actually do that as much, but I will compile everything. I will set up my session in Premiere mostly, and get that all organized. You ingest the footage, and then you kind of start assembling stuff. And that's usually where I go, is I'm looking at what is, again, the overall objective. What are we trying to accomplish with this edit? And then start to assemble accordingly.
And sometimes that looks different depending on, like you said, the objective, right? Sometimes, you're working off of a board or a script or a storyline. And sometimes you're tasked with, hey, here's the idea. This is supposed to be 30 seconds. Can you make a story within 30 seconds?
Yeah. So you start to do that. And I like to work, there's a buddy that was into editing and into film, and still is, but he once told me sequences are free. So make as many sequences as you want inside of Premiere, and I will, even if I make a really minute change, or a lot of times if I leave an edit overnight and I come back to it the next day, even if I'm not technically ready to make a new sequence, I just will, so I can kind of checkpoint where I was the day before. And it's a very helpful tool that bleeds into revisions as well. You're versioning and you're numbering all of your sequences that coincide with what you're sending to clients for rounds of review. And it definitely depends on the project. It can be a very slow process. It can be almost like you're rack focusing something and it's just slowly starting to come into focus. Sometimes that's really quick and it comes into focus super fast and it's easy and you're flowing and it's a really awesome time. But other times it's really grueling and you really have to step away and trust the creative process to find it. And eventually you will. And the cool thing about editing here is that a lot of times we are editing as a team. So you kind of get out of your own head as well and get suggestions dropped in of like, hey, try this. It keeps it fresh. It keeps it lively. It makes it so you don't get as stuck. And I'm learning from Carl and Josh, more experience than I am in all of this stuff. So that's really refreshing too.
Yeah. Again, the thought of like building the right team comes to mind. Like if our editor has all this power, you place all of this importance on the director, as you should, as the cinematographer of the project. That's where like, you're like, these are the people that are going to be directing and filming this. And this is what we're selling the project on. And then like, I find like a lot of times, like no one really asks about who's editing this. And again, this is a generality. Like sometimes people are thinking ahead and thinking about that. But it's just as important, right? Like where you're like, does this editor have the right vision? Do they understand what's going on? Are they up to speed? Oftentimes the director and the editor are working hand in hand in the post-production process to make sure that like the director's vision is being brought to the screen. And, it's a collaboration and again, depending on the project, it's like there's more leeway or less leeway in the editing. Sometimes it feels a little bit more like executing, and sometimes you're like, I'm the director of this. Like I'm taking this story that we shot and really making important decisions here about like what was good and what wasn't, and what was necessary and what isn't. Yeah. So it's interesting because like you said, there's such a wide variety that you want to make sure that like obviously you can flex and change your mindsets, but even as we zoom out, the first thing is like, do we have the right editor? Do they have time? That's a big thing with us right now is like, does Cole have time for this? Because there's 6 other projects that we're juggling. Do we need to get an external editor on this? Do they know what this is about? Can they accomplish it in the timeline? Can their computer handle the footage it's on? Or, like how fast is their internet? Like all of these factors that we think about, right, in the post-production process that just probably just seem like it's just we shoot it and then all of a sudden you get a Vimeo link and it's like rough cut. Yes. There's a lot that happens to get to a rough cut.
There's a ton that happens and there's been so many instances where I'm 2 hours in on YouTube trying to figure out this thing, trying to get Premiere to do like a certain thing. And a lot of it takes a lot of time and sometimes, I mean, working with Premiere is its own story in and of itself, but a lot of times
we won't go there.
Not a lot of times, but depending on the day, Premiere can decide to just act up.
It's moody.
And so you spend 45 minutes, an hour when you come in the morning trying to fix it so that you can get to assembling footage or whatever. So there's a lot that, just like being on set, there is still the potential for things to go awry. For, again, time is like a big thing. So I'm constantly thinking ahead and blocking out my schedule for, okay, I need 4 hours for this edit. I need to find that time
So let's zoom out again. And what is the process of, going through the post-production process? What, like, I know we mentioned rough cut, like, can you explain like the different stages of post-production? Like, we start with a rough cut, we head towards XYZ.
Yeah. So we'll bring the footage in, and again, we'll work towards the first pass at completing a deliverable, working our way towards a final.
I will also say assembly is sometimes it's like potentially
so,
something that we send as well.
Yeah, depending on the content, if it's really long interviews, sometimes initially you just send a transcript of the interview and your client wants to highlight and pull out their own sound bites. And a lot of times that's actually easier so that we aren't shooting in the dark on what we think would fit, because we're going to have a different vision than what they want for marketing purposes, or
they're wondering like, how good was their answer to this question?
Exactly.
And then like, there's a trust where it's like, yeah, it wouldn't exactly fit what we were trying to do here, but they can see that for themselves when they have a transcript, or they can see it strung out.
Yes. And it's also really important to realize what their inflection is and how they say something in that specific scenario, because you might read a line on a transcript that you think would fit perfectly, but it's super choppy. Their inflection is weird. It's asked in a question. So that is super important and really helpful to get right. And so after we have that, if that is the case, we just start moving through assembly. We're placing B-roll. We're doing really minimal things with sound and really minimal things with color. A lot of time we're just using proxies, which is just a basic color conversion from what the camera shoots raw internally.
Proxy is like a smaller file format so that we're not bogging down the computer.
Yes. A lot of times when we're shooting on the Red or we're shooting on other high-end cinema cameras, that footage is massive and it's very beefy, and it's hard for a computer in an NLE like Premiere to actually chop that up and move that around. So what you do is you make a lower res version of all the exact same clips, the same naming structure and everything. And it's nice in Premiere. There's just a little button that you click and it swaps out that footage, leaving it in place, but pulls from the proxies so that you can cut that up and move around way more quickly.
And we'll get into like color in a bit, but so then the rough cut is essentially the culmination of like the first round of what it's supposed to be.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
So like you said, minimal sound. Oftentimes the rough cut will throw a music track in there. It might not be polished, but the idea is, I guess sometimes they're like pretty dang close.
Yeah.
That's the goal.
Sometimes they can
That's the goal.
And really, like with the rough, that is the goal. Is we really love to make our rough cuts as close to final as they can be within reason. So a lot of times what we're doing mainly with a rough is working towards a picture lock. Once picture lock happens,
what's a picture lock?
Picture lock is all of the footage and all of the visuals are solidified and they will not change moving forward. So those essentially get locked in place. And we are not doing any more revisions. We are not changing anything in regards to visuals of the structure. That allows us to then move on to sound and color. Once you have everything in place, we're basically locking content. And so once that's done, it allows us to move on, because the last thing you want to have happen is get to sound design or color design and then be like, oh, we can't actually use this shot because we've gone back and forth with a sound designer or a colorist, and now we have to restructure our timelines and re-go through all of this stuff.
So it's kind of like where we as the production company are working towards like mini approvals from our clients, right? Whoever they might be, an agency or a client, where it's like, here's the assembly, send us the transcript. We get the approval to use whatever for this. Here's the rough cut. We nail it on version 1, of course. And then
always every time.
And then we get the lock on that. The color and sound phase, we typically refer to that as finishing. So we'll get the approval to head on to finishing, and then that cut that picture lock gets sent to different places at the point. A lot of this at this point, a lot of it would be either assistant editor and editor handling the project, and then from there it gets sent, like you said, to your sound designer and mixer, your colorist, and then VFX as well, right? Some VFX, we'll talk about this again, I think, a little bit when we break down like maybe more of what these things are, but you're doing that ahead of time and you have it to use in the edit. But sometimes it's to be incorporated at the end. Yeah.
Well,
or the final version of it.
Exactly. And I mean, even sometimes, if your project requires you to do a phone with a green screen on it, that comes in the midst of all of that stuff too. So there's not just like graphical VFX, but there's practical VFX as well.
So let's, before we get into the finishing process, let's talk about the revision process and like what it takes to get from rough cut 1 to picture lock. Typically, we really strive for like 3 revisions max. Oftentimes, we do what it takes to make the project successful, but what is the revision process like? And what are things that are on your mind as we go through that? And this is fun because I often am like in a position of communicating between client and Cole. Yeah. So it's fun to ask these questions to see what he's going to say.
And a lot of times I just let Nate tell me what to do. But yeah, the 3 rounds of revisions is really, it's nice.
It's like the standard.
It is the standard, and it protects us. It protects the project from being really, really strung out, and just slowly trudging along and feeling like you're not making any progress. But so we work through that, and a lot of times it's like you said, we'll get a version 1, we'll send it over on Vimeo, and then sometimes that gets distributed internally to whoever we're sending it to. The people that need to see it, get eyeballs on it, will. And then they will give us feedback, and that is kind of like the first point of that is a difference depending on who our client is. It's really nice and really, really convenient when we do use Vimeo for our clients to leave us comments right on the timeline. It's a wonderful feature in Vimeo, and some other software sharing platforms have that as well. But then it's nice because then you don't have to provide us with timestamps, and we can go in and see directly. Sometimes we get feedback given to us just in a email blast, and it takes a little bit extra time to kind of go through that, and that can kind of stir up some questions every now and again. Typically
the confusing thing about that is then someone responds to the email, and then it's hard to track down, one, where the feedback is, like coming through one channel, and then 2, if it was handled or not. Where like, if it is in the software and it's right where it is, you can mark it as complete. You can mark progress along the way. You can respond to it if there's like, hey, this is why we did this. If it's something that a question or warrants a response.
And a lot of that is really great for the easier changes, and not every comment can actually just be placed on a timeline in Vimeo. If there's bigger things that need to have happen, or if there is a conversation that needs
or a phone call or whatever,
exactly,
go over it with you.
Let's clarify this and let's sit down and actually talk through this. Is a lot of times needed beyond just, hey, left some comments on video, great, we'll get you a version 2. That isn't always the case.
Especially if this is one of those projects where we're finding the story in the edit, right? Yeah. Where we've shot it, we've done our best to plan ahead, but now, we're kind of taking stock of what we have. Especially when we're working with creative directors or, people who were executing their vision. It's like, let's jump on a call. Let's go through some of this footage. Sometimes they even come into the office and we go over it with them, whatever is needed. When we have a script or a storyboard, it's much more straightforward. And typically if we have a board, it's very cut and dry. If like, this is matching the board or whatnot.
That's a little bit easier. Yeah. And it is super helpful for us that regardless of if it's a comment, on a timeline, or if it's just an email, the more specific those comments are, the easier it is for us to just get right on those and to start tackling those. A lot of things can get lost in translation, and some people kind of have their own terminology for what they're thinking. And we run into that a lot where did you mean this, or were you actually talking about this? Both are doable, but based on how that came across, we weren't quite sure. So let's clarify that and let's like work through that. So it can be a little bit tricky sometimes to decipher each other's, as we're communicating with clients, to decipher what is actually being meant by this comment. And so that clarity is a really strong piece there. And I will say too, just because a lot of our recent projects have been multiple different videos over the same type of shoot, that even gets harder.
Which video are you talking about here?
Exactly. Yeah. And whatever,
one of 15, like which one?
Yeah. And it is super helpful. We have had clients give us, a spreadsheet breaking down by video with a little box that says
timestamp.
Exactly, timestamp, and that's amazing because then it's just a little checklist, and we go boom, 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 and then if we have a question, we'll say, hey, on video 3, whatever, we'll address that. But yeah, if there's multiple videos that we're reviewing and doing rounds of at the same time, that can get a little dicey too. And that is, again, one of those processes things where if we are shooting 5-10 videos at once, it's really nice to just bulk send those, bulk review those, and then
get feedback all at once.
Yes, exactly.
And then go and send. Yeah, exactly.
Yep.
And what comes to mind when you mention that as well is, I mentioned Cole in his role as an editor, and then briefly my role as like a post supervisor, or just continuing being a producer on the project, is a lot of times like trying to bridge the gap between like, I think this is what the client means by this, and then like even distilling down those comments to just giving you like, do this or don't, or like, I think that was like a question and not like an edit, and things like that, where it's another level and layer of like serving the client and understanding what they want and trying to anticipate their needs. Like, hey, I think on this one, like, should we add that lower third title in on this round, or should we wait one more? Or, like there's a lot of decisions that are actually made just between us or, whoever is working on the project, to try and make sure that everything that's being sent to the client is easy for them. So like you mentioned, it's easy for us when it's all in Vimeo. It might not be easiest for the client to jump into Vimeo and comment. So whether that's a spreadsheet or at least a hyper organized email that we can copy, paste, and put into our processes, we do our best to just serve the client in that way and really like anticipate them and serve them. But it's inevitable to communicate throughout that process where, a lot of times when you're on set, you're like standing right next to them. You're like, do you like this? And they're like, oh, this is what I mean. Perfect. Let's do this. But then you're like emailing a lot in post. And so there's a lot of clarification, there's phone calls, there's a lot of attention and project management that also happens in the post-production process to continue moving the project forward in a timely manner, making sure you know what's going on, making sure the client knows what to expect, that they know that color and sound are to come later on.
Yeah. And with that too, in terms of interfacing with clients on this, it can be really awesome sometimes because that kind of gives us, and mainly speaking for myself as an editor, an opportunity to speak into why something would work or why something wouldn't work. And a lot of times that's just giving the opinion of, hey, we shot this. That might not be the best fit for it. Let's try it over here and see how that fits. Or let's try this different thing, and here's why that might work with sound, with color, like the things that we're thinking about as we're editing, the client isn't always thinking about.
Yeah.
And that can sometimes lead to an actual better result, having that insight. Interfacing with us and allowing us to propose those ideas. And obviously, like you said, we're happy to make whatever changes necessary, but we care about the work that we do as well.
Yeah.
So when we're caring about that and we are kind of moving through that process, we want to be able to give our insight from our experience on, hey, this might work, or hey, this might not work.
Here's what we're seeing on our end. This is why we did X, Y, or Z, or this is why it's different than the board. you know, we think that didn't work quite as well as this. Sometimes we send 2 versions and say, hey, what one's your favorite? And, you know, trying to keep it in a streamlined process, and, you know, that's not the norm, I would say. But, it's another puzzle to solve. What is the best way to showcase this footage in order to, you know, get to home plate, right?
Yes. Yeah.
So, I love that. So we've talked a little bit about the revision process, you know, collaborating, building the right team, collaboration between, you know, the creative team and the production team. Once we have a picture lock we're really happy with, you know, the timelines, how we want it. And by timeline, I mean the story, the length that we want it, you know, everything is ready for picture lock. Now we go to the next phase, which is the finishing phase. And now is kind of where the polish really starts to take place in terms of how the picture lock is presented in the end, right? So we mentioned color, we mentioned sound, we mentioned VFX. This is when we package it correctly for whatever format it needs to be, the final naming, all of those things, that whatever needs to be done. Archiving is even another part of the process, putting it away. What, can you explain, like, I guess the finishing process, maybe in more detail?
Yeah. Picture lock happens. We get a green light to go to finishing on a project. There's a couple different things that take place at the bare minimum. You know, if we aren't doing a crazy ton of VFX work, color and sound are the biggest things that we focus on in finishing. And so what will usually happen is, depending on who our colorist is and where that's going, they have different requirements for the format that we're going to send them. Sometimes we're bouncing the whole timeline in a really flat color profile in ProRes Quad 4, and we're sending it out, and they color it all in one nice video chunk that is the exact length of our sequence. They color that, they send it back to us, and we drop it in, and color's done. Color can go through multiple rounds of revisions as well. So that is also another thing, is, you know, hey, can we make that sky, you know, a different shade? Can we make this person, or hey, the biggest thing with color is skin tones. Hey, this skin tone is green or a little bit magenta. So let's dial that in and get that to a natural place.
I think it's important too to mention that all of these things are affected by how we shot the project. You know, of course the editing, but now as we go to finishing, this is really where the file format, the quality of the cameras and the lenses tends to really make a difference, right?
Yeah.
So when you go to the color grade, you know, when we're shooting on set, we want to make sure that we're exposing correctly so that your windows aren't blown out if they're not supposed to be, right? Or that the skin tones aren't weird or anything like that.
There's a lot of the hiccups, you know, on the post side, you know, the saying, hey, we'll fix it in post. Like, that's said as a joke because you don't want to have to rely on post to fix something.
There's been an insane amount of tools that allow you to, but it's also a dangerous game to play.
And there's becoming more tools.
Yeah.
Cough, cough, AI. But and really, you know, if you're shooting something really underexposed, the colorist is going to, you know, it's going to be harder for them to get that into a certain place that they want. You know, and you have certain colorists, just like you have certain cinematographers with a certain style, you know, where we're sending these certain types of projects to this colorist and these certain types to another colorist. But how the camera is set up, how the DP is choosing to light things has a huge impact on color, huge impact on the latitude, like you're saying. Like if all of the information is there, your colorist is going to be really happy in terms of dynamic range, white balance, you know, all of that stuff matching. So
yeah, and the creative importance of color is definitely often under emphasized, right? Like I think in terms of how you feel when you see the image is very heavily due to lighting, composition, of course, all of the things that is kind of a given, but color is often not even thought about for the average person. You know, whether it's like a really blue, cool image or whether it's warm, like the same exact image could be colored in a different mindset. And so this part of the process is again another callback to what are we trying to accomplish with this job, right? Is this a clean commercial look? Is this a gritty, story, like historical
Moody
piece or whatever? Is this like very like, tungsten, or is it very secret agent action movies tend to be more blue and kind of contrasty in that way. Sci-fi. So it's a level of like, chef's kiss, right? It's like how you're seasoning the meat almost in a way where you've done all this to like get a good quality cut. You've stored it well, you've prepared the grill, you've grilled it up, and now it's time to season it and put the final touch on it, right? And if it's seasoned wrong for what it's supposed to be, then it leaves weird. It can kind of contradict, right? So it's again another piece of the production process that to me, I think the importance that I would want to get across to people listening affects the visual brand of this video to an extremely large amount, right? Like if this color isn't in line with your brand image, it isn't in line with like what people think about when they see the your brand, then it's not going to feel cohesive with the rest of what you're doing or the project itself, right? So all of those things working together, again, another part of the process that's kind of a make or break moment.
Yeah. And it takes a solid team, putting the right team together, both on the production side and the post side to make that a reality. Because, if your brand image is very bright and warm and inviting, and then things are shot really underexposed, or people, don't really know what they're doing, and it turns out to be this dark, moody thing, it's not going to sit right. It's not going to feel right.
It'll confuse. Yeah. And also, it's not uncommon to use, depending on the project, to use footage that's from different cameras, that's been shot at different times of day. And the color process not only gives it a creative touch, but it also in a functional mindset just makes everything look right. Like say you're using a B cam that's slightly different than your A cam. They look at skin tones a different way. You have an A/B setup. You need to make sure that when you cut to your B cam, all of a sudden the skin tone doesn't look completely different and the color space is different, right? Yeah. So there's like a functional level of like almost to see it as you would perceive it in real life. And then there's a creative stylized thing. And it's fun to kind of walk the line between obviously different projects, right? Like you mentioned, are more stylized is how we kind of refer to them, or they're more just like, this is how it's just it needs to be colored well, but it needs to be like how you would perceive it in person.
Yes.
So a lot of commercial projects, you want it to look natural, you want it to look vibrant and like great, but you don't want it to look like a movie, right? But then some of them, it's like you're really trying to get a certain feel or a contrast between an indoor and outdoor space. And there's all this is color, right? Like it's beyond even just the edit, which is really cool.
There's a fine line between excellent color, I think, and an Instagram filter. and that line can, if someone doesn't really know what they're doing,
or a LUT.
Yeah. Or just slapping a preset on something. So
oftentimes at this point of the process, you've been looking at a LUT, correct? What's a LUT?
A LUT stands for lookup table. Cameras a lot of times shoot in a flat color profile, which is referred to as log. And when you look at that on the camera, everything's basically, it almost looks black
washed
and white.
out and gray.
It's all very gray. And that's mainly so that you can really see the whole dynamic range of what the camera is seeing. And so that is a different color space than what we're watching on a TV or what we're watching on our iPhone. And so it goes through a lot of conversions to get to that final place from a raw cinema camera codec and container. So yeah, when we're pulling projects in, when we're pulling footage into Premiere, we're making proxies, and a lot of times those proxies have a baked in what's called a conversion LUT, usually to Rec 709, which is a very common color space that you can see most of the color spectrum very, very easily and naturally. And it's not stylized. It's not a look, although there can be creative LUTs created as well. So yeah, it really kind of depends. And some projects, the DP has a very specific LUT for that project that's been thought through ahead of time, or it's just something that they really gravitate towards. And it's not a final look, but it's not a clean basic conversion either. And so it kind of gets you closer to what final color might look like in camera on set, which is really, really nice.
And the difference between that and your final color to an untrained eye might not actually be very different.
Right.
It might even just be a feeling where you're like, why does this feel more cohesive? And
Yes.
it's kind of just the process of making it all vibe.
Yes.
To use a very technical term. Another part of the finishing process that you mentioned was like sound design and mix, which is an exciting thing for you and myself. But again, it's another point in the process where typically the editor's done a little bit more on the sound design side of things, just in terms of the really key sound effects that might be pushing the momentum of the edit together. So if there's a shot of glass breaking, then they might find a glass breaking sound effect and throw it in there so that the client sees that there's going to be a sound effect of glass breaking there if there wasn't on-set audio recorded, or if it's just matched with what we recorded on set.
Right.
But then there's a whole nother level. And so there's kind of two, coming from my audio background now, there's kind of two different types of sound effects. One is like practical sound effects, and I can't remember the technical term, but
Diegetic.
Yeah. So I look at that as like creative sound effects, right? So sound effects that more make the audience feel something, but it's not practical. Like the door didn't open and you heard a creak. That's practical. Versus like a bass dropping when like something is a realization from something. That's diegetic.
Transition sound effects.
Yeah.
It might be opposite. Diegetic might be the practicals. Non-diegetic might be, I can't remember.
Someone fact check us.
Yeah. Drop that in the comments.
So again, there's another layer of functionality. I think there's a level of like, okay, communication in the post project, like there's going to be a sound of this in the final where that's going to happen in the sound design phase. Or again, a lot of times there's a basic level of sound design in the edit, dishes clanking and atmosphere. A lot of that stuff we don't get too specific on until the sound design phase because it's going to change. Right. So that's again, pointing back to the picture lock. We're really not worried about the exact details of that until we get to picture lock. Oftentimes then, you would export an OMF, which is basically another different file type that gets sent to a sound designer or mixer, where I can open it up in a DAW, digital audio workstation, and then start mixing creatively, getting all the sound design in place. I break it up into like music, sound effects, and then dialogue, and then kind of not only clean up edits, think about how I can make it cohesive. Again, support that edit and that vision.
Well, and a lot of it too is like you said with color, it can be a feeling, but the visual side of video is 50% of what your brain is ingesting as you're watching something. The other 50% is sound and is audio. And again, audio can also make or break a piece. If you have an interview and it sounds awful and it's crackly and it's static or it's clipping every time they open their mouth, that's not enjoyable to watch, and no one will.
Even if it looks beautiful.
Exactly. It doesn't matter how beautiful it looks. So sound is super important to get right, to polish, to take our creative process and take our time through that, so that again, we are working towards the objective of whatever it is we're trying to accomplish on the other side of the project.
Another thing is like the whole idea of music, and depending on the project, we have more flexibility and we can spend more time. Like, so, right, like on the highest end, you're like making music specifically for a project, right? Like what would feel right here, and you're literally composing a custom piece to fit it. Oftentimes we're working through a lot of libraries that has music already composed that we can use, and that the editor's using. So you've got your basic sound effects, you've got your music basically decided by the picture lock in a typical commercial process. And then that music isn't going to be changing once we get into a sound design and a mix, unless otherwise specified. Maybe change like how it's being perceived or the edit of the music, but the track of it is almost as important to what you're seeing in the rough cut, where it's like, you could obviously, like, you could look at one scene, and just like you can make it blue or yellow or whatever, right, in your color, if you have like this dopey soundtrack, it can make something seem like funny or comedic versus like a serious, and the same exact scene.
Yeah. It can be satire, or it can be super serious.
Or it could be serious. Yeah. It's all because you understand the purpose of it by the music that's fitting. So
yeah, and I think, like, to your point there, in all of this, it's coming back to intentional creative choices, choices that are made. How everything from how things are shot, even white balance on a camera is super intentional. If you're shooting indoors and you want to really cool it off or really warm it up, like, that's an intentional creative decision that was made for a reason, usually. and sometimes we have to fix that in post. However, a lot of this color, sound design, VFX, it's all done with intention, and it's not just because, oh yeah, like, that looks good. Like, yes, we want it to look good, and by golly, it will. But a lot of it is a very intentional decision, creatively speaking, both on the planning side, but then once we're into post, we're doing things for a certain reason, for a certain purpose, to emit a certain feeling, to say a certain message, even with color and sound design.
And you're really selling your taste when you do that, right? So like when you're a colorist is selling, this is what I think looks good. And, you know, obviously there are standards and there's a reference. But in the same way, in the sound design, it's like, this is the taste. This is the volume of the sound effect that I would put to translate well between the TV or the phone. And again, there's another layer of, what is this for? Is this for broadcast TV? Is this for streaming? Is this for like social? And making sure that it's going to translate well to the medium that it's supposed to be consumed in, right? There's even a difference between like, if you get really in the weeds on some of this, there can be different versions of mixes for different platforms, and then therefore different final deliverables that are packaged.
Right.
This color is for this device, and this mix is for that device. And then, you know, you can break it up. Oftentimes one size fits all for, you know, the digital space. But if you're starting to break it up into, this is going to be for film festivals and it's going to be for our website, there might be different mixes. You might boost the vocal a little bit, the dialogue, the vocal. So all of that's, you know, where the art comes into play. Like, film is the balance between like business, science, and art. And you know, there is a level of, this has to be to this level, and there's the science there and the technical side of it, and then there's the taste that you're really bringing to the end. Similar thing in VFX. A lot of the VFX in a basic video are done before the rough cut is picture locked. That also makes a difference, as you can imagine, on if it's going to have sound design on it.
Right.
You know, for instance, if a title is moving in a certain way, as a sound designer, I'm going to look at that and go, how can I motivate that, right? Like, if text is writing on screen, if it's a script and it's kind of being painted on screen, I might give it some sort of sound so that it feels real and tactile, and that's supposed to be there. And hopefully you don't even realize those things, right? Like, and oftentimes you don't perceive them as the end user, because it just seems right.
Yeah. It seems natural. It fits, and it motivates the whole timeline altogether.
So this has been a pretty technical in the weeds episode for some, but I'm sure an interesting unveiling for others. And you know, it's the world we live in oftentimes, right? Shooting is often done in a matter of a few days, and post-production often takes weeks, sometimes months. Just feedback loops and revisions and everything that goes into this. And so, you know, there's cycles for us where we get to shoot a lot, and then, you know, especially Cole, he's like, okay, this is a big edit week, and it's going to be like these 6 projects that we're going to be editing on. So it's kind of cool to chat a little bit about that.
Yeah, we go back and forth all the time, and it's sweet again Nate gets me out of my own head on projects, and then I'll say, no, here's what we could do instead. And it makes me think of a different idea. So doing that together as a team, deciphering the needs of the client, and kind of splitting that up is really helpful, like in that regard.
And again, I think it's important to stress that like this is another extension of, go listen to the pre-production episodes, go listen to the creative ideas, right? Like this is another extension of bringing the way we started the project home. It's like, it's still based on the tone that was set in pre-production, right? Like there is a difference between the story we write, the story we shoot, and the story we edit. But it's all influenced by that creative idea, right? Everything still starts with the idea.
Mm-hmm.
Everything still starts with a good plan,
Yeah.
With the process, right? Like the creative process. It starts with an understanding of story,
Mm-hmm.
the craft, and then it works towards, it's like the symphony, right? Where, production's its own symphony, pre-production's it's another one, and then post is its own animal.
Mm-hmm.
But it's so cool to, at the end of the day, there is a lot of satisfaction to, sometimes months of hard work on something
Mm-hmm.
that eventually gets to the point where maybe it's a 60-second video,
Mm-hmm.
but when you look at it, it's like all of these little really important good decisions made into a very hyper distilled effective product.
Yeah.
And that's where we find satisfaction at the end of the day,
Absolutely.
doing that for
Mm-hmm.
our clients.
That is super rewarding. And again, like it takes a team to like get there, right? Like implementing people where they shine the most in their skill sets of not one single person can direct, shoot, edit, color, sound design. And if they are, I would venture to say probably not as good as it would be with a full-fledged team
Mm-hmm.
of experts in each one of those things.
Yeah. And I think, zooming out again and thinking about tying this all together, we're thinking about the edit. We as the production company are thinking about the edit when we're sending you a proposal. When we take your idea, we're thinking about how can we deliver this edit? What pieces of the puzzle get to this final stage? So it's not something that we begin to think about after we have all of the footage that gets handed off. That's just when the process starts. But we're thinking about what is this going to look like in the edit when we're shooting, right? We run into this sometimes where details that don't matter in the edit bog us down in production, where it's like, that's not going to matter. It's not even in frame.
Right.
Or, it's going to cut before that. So it's really important, to recognize that the director, the position the director serves on set, is also like, they're almost like an on-site editor, right? They're editing by saying, we have it, right? Like at what point can you move on from a scene after after the fifth time we've shot it? Like what mysterious thing happens when you as the client see the director like ask for another take and then eventually go, yep, that works. We got it.
Mm-hmm.
That's the take they want in the edit. That's the vision that they had for the project.
Mm-hmm.
In their mind, that's good enough for the edit.
Depending on the project as well, it's like, obviously good directors do their job incredibly well, so that when you do get to the edit, it's pretty seamless and it's pretty smooth. However, again, it still can be like, oh, I thought that take was the best one, but actually this one works. Or
once you see it,
that cut's going to change. Like we
Mm-hmm.
dropped that and we're not even going to use that, Kill Your Darlings is a saying on the post side of like, hey, that shot was super great, but if it's not serving the story, if it's not serving the mission or the objective, we don't need it. Let's lose it and save it for real.
Another, and maybe as we kind of wrap up this thing that comes to mind is cut downs. And, say we're doing a 90-second video. This is often decided in pre-production, but it's also, I feel like, almost equally common to happen once we're through a project where people say, actually, could we get like another version of this? Maybe it's 6 seconds, 15 seconds, 30 seconds for this format. A lot of times that happens after we get picture lock of the main edit so that we can then use the pieces of the main edit and maybe summarize them into smaller edits.
Mm-hmm.
I love this as a producer, as an account manager, because I think it's an awesome way for our clients to get more value out of their investment, right? Like video is an investment. To do it right, it's a big investment for people. So how do we maximize the amount of products that you get from this investment? We're going to still shoot like maybe slightly more than we typically would have, but all it takes is a little bit of planning to really like be able to think about, hey, can we ask them one more question with this frame of mind? Because we're going to use that for this version. Yeah. And now we have 6 other 15-second cuts out of our 90-second, brand film or whatever it is that we can use for digital media advertising or social posts or whatever, trailers. All of that can be thought about. It's best when it's thought about ahead of time so that we have flexibility in the edit. Exactly. But it's not uncommon to have additional deliverables, as we call them, in the post-production process. And I think it just came to mind as another thing that would probably be worth mentioning, based on the idea of just walking through the post-production process.
Yeah.
What's your favorite thing about post-production?
Favorite thing about post-production?
He's like finishing it.
Getting it off of my to-do list.
checking your your to-do list.
I don't know. I think it is kind of a magical, whimsical place. And to see something come together. I think my favorite part of post is when I have been on set. If it's something I've shot even, or if I've just been there to like see the process. Because there is something even more deeply satisfying than just being a part of the finishing on something, but to be there since the beginning, since the idea creation, to see that translate to production and to see production translate into post-production, and then to see it when it's all done and be like, hey, we started this 4 months ago. And we traveled for this and we did all these things and we planned, and to see it come together in a way that hits you or makes you feel something or says something really unique, that is super cool. And to see that as it comes into focus on my computer screen is like really fun, really, really fun.
I love that. I think that's very well said. And I would agree. I think that the coolest part about film production is how many people touch the project, and to see all of that come to, I like to just use the word distilled. Like, I think all of this just gets distilled down, and it's like each stage of the process, the idea gets passed through a finer and finer screen. And then, eventually it gets down to the point where we made some decisions here and now we have this product. Yeah. And it's when the service becomes a product.
Yeah. I mean, it's kind of crazy, if you're thinking about a 30-second or a 60-second spot, or just even a short social thing, you might shoot 140 clips, but you use 30. So like distilling all of that down is, kind of where the magic happens, and you're picking the best of the best to say what you want it to say and to get it to do what you want it to do. But there's an art there, right? And like we kind of talk about, we subscribe to the idea that film is kind of an ultimate medium for that sense of you're combining visual and auditory mediums together into one. Nate and I both love music, and Nate comes from a very strong music and music producing background. And that is just kind of a one-way street in terms of what the end result is. But then, like you were saying, I was even editing today, and there was a section of dialogue that was back and forth, and I dropped a track in, and it just brought the scene to life because of how much of an impact music alone has on something, let alone sound effects. So
check out Brittany's episode, by the way, just talking about that a little bit in more detail if you haven't already. Yeah. I think it's episode 3 or something.
Yes, I think so. But to see those two things, a visual medium where you can have gorgeous shots outside of nature, a gorgeous portrait, a moving portrait of someone, a beautiful interview setup that really captivates you and draws you into a scene. And then to hear that played out with dialogue, with sound effects, and with music, there's a reason that film and streaming, and we're also captivated by it for a reason. It's because it's powerful. It's really powerful when those two things start to come together. So when we pour our hearts into this craft, it's really special to see it, come together at the end of the day.
We have a saying at Taproot that is, we get to do this. And
it's on this wall over here.
Yeah, you guys can't see that, but we promise.
Come into our office.
But gratitude is an important part of what we get to do. And we remind ourselves of that often and are so thankful for our clients who trust us with their work, all the way from the pre-production process and the strategizing of their ideas, all the way through that final deliverable that is curated specially for the purpose that it was set out to do. So thank you for your time today. Joining Cole and I as we just kind of bro out and dialogue about and nerd out maybe a little bit about what it is that we do day in and day out. Please, follow us, subscribe. I think YouTube is our main platform for this. If you're on Spotify, shoot us a follow. Check out all of the shorts that we Cole has fun making, all of the memes that he gets to insert there to try to make me and others laugh.
It's a good time.
We really want to make sure that this is valuable. And our aim is to demystify a lot of the things in filmmaking that often are a little murky or just kind of mystical from the outside looking in. So that's the purpose here. We're thankful for what we get to do. Feel free to reach out if you have any questions about this or anything else. Nate at taprootpictures.com or Cole at taprootpictures.com. We'd love to respond and chat or grab coffee and just talk shop. So anything else that you would want to say?
Love your post people. Treat them well.
Give them hugs.
Yeah.
I love that. Love everybody, but especially your post people. That's good.
Yep.
Cool. Well, thanks everybody. Until next time.
Later.
Peace.